My son smiled at me, handed me a fishing rod, and said this would be our weekend to reconnect. Just the two of us, out on the lake, quiet, peaceful, like old times, and a few hours later, he took the boat and left me there, alone, drifting, miles from shore. Number signal, no help, nothing but water and silence. And I didn't shout, I didn't panic, I just stood there, watching the wake disappear. Because panic solves nothing, and I learned that a long time ago. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 62 years old, and for over 30 years, I worked as a federal investigator specializing in organized crime and financial deception. I've seen men betray partners, families turn on each other for less than nothing. I built cases on lies that started small and ended in destruction. So when my own son looked back at me one last time before disappearing across that lake, I didn't see confusion, I saw decision. And that's what made it real. The water was calm. The kind of stillness that feels unnatural. Like the world is holding its breath. The sky stretched wide above me. No clouds, no sound. Just the faint echo of the engine fading into distance. And I stood on that narrow piece of driftwood, the makeshift dock we had anchored earlier, replaying the moment again and again. The way his tone shifted, the way he avoided eye contact, the way he checked his phone just before starting the engine. Small details, but details matter. They always do. He had planned this. Not impulsive, not emotional. Structured, controlled, intentional. And that meant one thing. This wasn't about the trip. This was about removing me. And when someone removes you, it's never random. I checked my pockets slowly. Phone dead. No reception even if it wasn't. Wallet, keys, nothing useful. Just time. And time in a situation like that becomes your only weapon if you know how to use it. I sat down carefully, letting the wood shift beneath me, balancing my weight, conserving energy. Because survival isn't about strength. It's about control, and I had control. At least for now. The sun moved slowly across the sky, each minute stretching longer than the last. And I let my mind work, not on fear, but on pattern. Because what happened out there didn't start on that lake. It started days earlier. Maybe weeks, maybe longer, and I had missed it. Or maybe I had seen it and chosen not to act. Either way, it was there, and now I needed to go back, piece by piece, moment by moment, to understand why my own son would leave me to die in the middle of nowhere. And as the light began to fade and the temperature dropped just enough to remind me how exposed I really was, one thought settled in quietly. Not emotional, not dramatic, just clear. This wasn't a mistake, and whatever I had overlooked before stepping onto that boat was the reason I was now stranded, alone, waiting, and that meant if I wanted to survive this, I needed to understand it before it was too late. The truth is, moments like that don't come out of nowhere. They build slowly, quietly, in things most people ignore. And as I sat there watching the horizon fade into darkness, I started going back, not to the trip, but to the days before it, the small changes. The subtle shifts in behavior that didn't make sense at the time, but made perfect sense now. My son Ryan had been distant, not cold, just measured, like every word he said had already been decided before he spoke it. Conversations felt shorter, responses more controlled, and the calls, those late night calls he would step outside to take, lowering his voice just enough so no one could hear. I noticed it. Of course I did, but I didn't confront him. Because confrontation closes doors and I needed them open. There was also the money. Small at first, then larger. Transfers that didn't align with anything he told me. Investments he couldn't explain clearly, and every time I asked, he smiled, reassured me, said everything was fine. But fine is a word people use when they don't want you to look deeper. And I let it go, not because I believed him, but because I was watching. Then came the fishing trip. His idea, sudden, urgent, almost eager. He insisted we go alone. No guides, no friends, just us. Like we used to, and that detail stayed with me. Because isolation isn't just a setting, it's a strategy. And I should have seen it for what it was the morning we left. I noticed something else. The way he checked the fuel, twice. The way he secured the equipment, not loosely, but precisely. Like someone preparing for something specific. Not a casual outing, and even then, I didn't stop him. I didn't question him. I just observed. Because sometimes the only way to understand a plan is to let it unfold completely. And now, sitting alone in the middle of that lake, those pieces began to connect, not perfectly, not fully, but enough to form a shape. This wasn't just about me. This was about something else, something bigger, something that required me to be removed, at least temporarily. And that meant someone else was involved. Because people don't make moves like this alone. The wind shifted slightly, carrying a faint sound from the distance. Maybe a boat, maybe nothing, but it reminded me of one thing. Time was moving, and I needed to move with it. Not physically, but mentally, because survival depended on clarity. Not panic. I leaned back slightly, conserving energy again, and focused on one question that mattered more than anything else. What changed? And the answer came slowly, but clearly. Everything changed when he met her, his fiancée. The one he introduced just months ago, charming, composed, to composed. The kind of person who doesn't reveal much but observes everything, and I had seen that before. Many times, in interviews, in investigations, in people who operate with intent. She had influence, not obvious, not aggressive, but consistent, guiding conversations, redirecting decisions, shaping outcomes without ever appearing responsible. And Ryan followed, not blindly, but willingly. And that was the difference. This wasn't just betrayal, it was direction. And direction always comes from somewhere, and as that realization settled in, one final piece clicked into place. This wasn't about leaving me behind. It was about making sure I didn't interfere. By the time the first light touched the water again, I was still there, tired but alert, because I hadn't wasted the night thinking about fear. I had spent it understanding the situation, and understanding gives you leverage even when you have nothing else. A passing boat eventually appeared in the distance. Slow, steady, and I signaled just enough to be seen. Not desperate, not frantic, just visible. And that was enough. They brought me in without questions, without delay, and within hours I was back on land. But I didn't go home, not immediately, because the moment I stepped back into normal life, everything would change. And I needed it to stay exactly as it was. Just a little longer. I contacted someone I trusted, a former colleague, someone who knew how to follow patterns without drawing attention. I gave him one name, Ryan, and one instruction. Everything, no assumptions, no shortcuts, just facts. What came back wasn't surprising, but it was complete. Financial links, unexplained transfers, connections to shell accounts. And behind it all, one central point, his fiancée. Not just influence, control. She wasn't new to this. She had done it before. Different names, different cities, same pattern. Build trust, isolate, target, remove obstacle. And in this case, I was the obstacle, so I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't expose anything. Not yet, because the only way to stop something like this is to let it reach the point where it can't escape. I returned home calmly, acted normal, responded like nothing had happened. Even when Ryan came back later that day with the story already prepared, engine trouble, sudden current, couldn't find me. All rehearsed, all controlled. I listened, I nodded, I accepted it, and that was exactly what they needed me to do, because it confirmed their belief that I didn't know. And belief like that creates vulnerability. Over the next few days I worked quietly, documenting everything, coordinating with my contact, building a case not just against her, but against the entire structure behind her. And when the time was right, I created the final step, an opportunity, something they couldn't ignore, a transfer large enough to complete their plan, but controlled enough to expose it completely. And when they moved forward, we were ready. The meeting was set quietly, no tension, no urgency, just another step in their plan. At least that's what they believed. Ryan sat across from me, calm, confident, his fiancée beside him, composed as always, eyes steady, voice measured. They thought this was the end of the process, the moment everything would finalize. I let the silence sit just long enough before speaking. You planned it well, I said calmly, and for the first time her expression shifted slightly. Not fear, not yet, but awareness. Ryan looked at me confused. What do you mean? I leaned back slightly. Nothing dramatic, just enough to change the tone. I mean the trip, the timing, the story. You removed the problem before completing the plan, and that's when everything stopped. Not physically, but mentally. The shift was immediate. The control they thought they had began to slip, and that's when the door opened. Officer stepped in, calm, controlled, no chaos, no noise, just presence. And presence was enough. Her composure broke first, then Ryan's confusion turned into realization, and realization into silence. I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse, I didn't need. The evidence spoke clearly. Every transaction, every call, every connection documented, complete, unavoidable. And as they were taken away, I watched quietly, not satisfied, not angry, just resolved, because moments like that aren't about revenge, they're about truth, and truth doesn't need emotion to be powerful. Weeks later, the house felt different, quieter, but stable, the way it should have been. From the start, I sat alone one evening, looking out across the water, thinking about that moment on the lake. Not the fear, not the isolation, but the clarity, because in the end it wasn't the Wilderness that nearly ended me. It was trust placed in the wrong place at the wrong time. And as I stood there, one final thought settled and calm. Certain complete people don't betray you. Suddenly they prepare for it quietly, and if you're paying attention long enough, you'll see it coming just before they think you never will.